What is up, my friends? Welcome back to a brand new video. Today we are taking a look at a string arrangement and an orchestration I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to do for an audio podcast, an audio drama called Dark Dice. And before I really dive into the orchestration and the arrangement, I want to give a big thanks to my friend Stephen Malin. He gave me the opportunity. He is a wonderful composer. He does a lot of work for 2D animation games. I think that's kind of his specialty. So he has a lot of experience in the field. And we've connected before, so we kind of had a sense of what we each did. And so I was very fortunate to have a chance to kind of work with him and basically orchestrate his mock-ups or his sketches into a more full-fledged arrangement, after which they would be sent to a copyist to have them transcribed out for live players, the Budapest Orchestra, for them to perform. So it's a very interesting experience. I had the opportunity to be part of a bigger project and not just work for myself, obviously. And so, again, big thanks to Steven for having me on board. And again, he does some wonderful work. So I definitely recommend you guys check out his channel. Just type in Stephen Malin on YouTube and you'll find his channel right away. And one more thing I want to give you before we actually get started here, and that is my free guide on how to write Lush string parts. And this is one of my favorite guides that I've ever written because the art of string writing and string arranging is such an intricate and detailed process. But before you really get to a really resonant and beautiful Lush result, there are a few concepts that we all kind of need to understand about music in general in order to have that kind of flowing lush sound in the strings, right? So this guide kind of details some very crucial steps to actually take you from just having regular string parts to having an arrangement that works and flows together. So if you want to check that out, it's the first link in the description box below. It's totally free, and it's just my thank you to you for watching this video. And let's get into it. So basically, I was very fortunate because Steven not only sent me a little sketch, which we can actually play through first, but he also sent me a couple of notes on what to focus on, like what to look out for when arranging this from start to finish. So the biggest thing is really the time constraint, because if you're writing this for a form of media that is not like a standalone thing, if it involves music in some way, then the music actually plays like second fiddle to the main core element, right? So if it's like a podcast or a drama of some sort, the music has to support what's happening in the forefront. So in this case, there is some sort of like a time restriction. And if we actually click here, and I'll go to, you can see the timer here is 3 minutes and a second. And I really tried to make it super like on point where I was as close to 3 minutes as possible, okay? So you can see Steven's original sketch was a little bit longer. He likes to give you extra material so you can kind of trim it down later and work with it. And yeah, he said it could be 4/4 and 3/4 at 44 BPM or 8/8 and 6/8 at 88. So you can choose two different ways to think about the same type of material. We were looking for like a 3-minute loop, right? So before it's like around 4 minutes, condense it down to 3 minutes, which means you have to remove some material and then kind of make the rest of it cohesive together. Use solo violins, so solo strings, but also come up with some ensemble string patches, and then some hurdy-gurdy drones, and some dulcimer as well. So that's a big theme for this podcast audio drama, is that it's a more kind of a medieval sound, some ethnic sounds there. So he provided me with a hurdy-gurdy and dulcimer bow harp type of patches that he created himself and sampled himself in order to, create these arrangements. So let's have a quick listen to the arrangement. Maybe I'll start from the beginning. You can get a sense of what it sounds like, and then I'll kind of show you what I did to flesh out the arrangement. Here we go. Okay, so we'll stop there, but you get a sense of the sketch there, right? So the first part, we kind of have a basic string pad section at the very bottom, and then on top there's a solo violin, which I really like the samples of that, by the way. I'm not exactly sure what library Steven used there, but it sounds very expressive. And then following that, there's a cello solo, and I believe that's a Tina Guo cello. Just listening to the legato transitions, I have a feeling that's the library. And then the C section, or the third section, we kind of have a piano solo, which is kind of meant to be expanded out into the strings as well. So let me kind of walk you through the libraries that I used here to take that a little further. And I knew that I didn't really want libraries that were overly bright and just took up a lot of the frequency spectrum, because the overall vibe of the piece is darker in nature and it just has more of a somber feeling. So I really wanted to go with libraries that contributed to that feeling as well. So you can see here I have Cinematic Studio solo strings, and the entire Cinematic Studio series tends to be on the darker side in the first place. So it makes a lot of sense in my context, or in this case, to use that. Now I did use the Audio Imperia solo cello for the solo cello part you heard in the sketch as well. Then the hurdy-gurdy patch from Steven. I brought in all the main sections of the string orchestra from Cinematic Studio Strings. Those are all the yellow tracks. And then we have the double basses, but pizzicato. And I actually like the pizzicato from Araya quite a bit compared to the Cinematic Studio Strings. Those are just a little bit overly dry for my taste, and they don't really come through the mix as much. Then there's the hammer dulcimer and the bow harp, which are also in there. And then there's also a bit of percussion that's included. I believe Steven told me this later, that they wanted some sort of a military kind of marching feeling, like something to really drive the movement of the piece forward. So I put in some damage too, stuck with basically the main patch, I believe. Let me double check. This is the Darbukas and Tomback Clacks performance patch. And then after that, we have a shaker ensemble from Metropolis Arc 3. And okay, this is the Armageddon Ensemble All Stars patch, which is the default patch in Damage 2. Beautiful library, by the way, so in case you're interested. So let me play through and show you what this kind of sounds like. Hear the strings kind of working together there. We have the percussion on the bottom, just emphasizing the main beat here. Little break, and then here's the theme. 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 6. Cool, let's stop there. So you just noticed the overall percussion groove, right? There's a lot of syncopation in there, which in my opinion is very key to creating an interesting percussion pattern in your arrangements, So you do want the downbeats. You do want the core beats to be laid out on the strong beats, right? So, ones and sometimes the threes, but at the same time, you want to take advantage of the ands, like the offbeats in between. So you can go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, for example. So stressing those ands kind of gives it a little bit of additional interest. And in this case, I did it mainly with these drums here. And then with the deep drums, let me see. So these are just kind of accenting the main downbeats. It's difficult to kind of count because the time signature keeps on changing here, kind of like 8/8 to 6/8 to 8/8 to 6/8, and then after that it's 6/8 throughout. But you get a general sense of the rhythmic pattern there, and then the shakers are just providing the high end clacks, So just kind of play those in by hand and then quantize them. Without them, you hear it just kind of misses that interest in the high end there, which is pretty important. Now, keep in mind that this doesn't have to sound 100% realistic because, again, these were to be recorded by real players later. So the idea was just to get a full enough mock-up and the lines kind of fleshed out enough so that the orchestra or the copyist, the transcriber, she could basically go through and write out all the notation for each of the individual sections on all the different players. So the solo violin from CSSS is obviously the solo violin. Then if we take a look at the main string parts here, let me just highlight these guys. Oops. Let's include the solo cello as well. You see, for the most part, they are playing a chordal function, but sometimes we have these inner movements, right? Maybe to follow what the chords are, but at the same time, you know, we want everything to have a certain purpose, right? So there's the cellos in the middle. Maybe let's remove that one. So the inner line here. I think that could be the viola or something, or the cello, you know. Violins too. Now this part's slightly more active because here's the violin ensemble taking over the melody, layering it with the solo violin. So a little bit of movement there in the bass, you can see. Right, so generally you can see, and this is something I try to stay consistent with in all of my arrangements, is to try to keep the inner lines as smooth as possible, because the best way you can really create a line that speaks to a musician is to give them a sort of a melodic shape. And that's why I usually think like, you know, trailer music or a lot of arrangements that have repeating notes over and over again for like 5-10 minutes on end, while it can be very exciting to listen to, for the musicians themselves, it could get a little bit boring to play, right? And so I think usually the best results come when you give the musician something interesting and fun to perform. And so that's what I've tried to do with each of these lines, you know, whether or not they're playing a melody, even if they're sustaining longer notes, you can see they do switch notes here and there, which is very important. Now at the beginning, I did try to keep it a little more static just because the energy is not as high in the beginning, right? But later in the piece, you see there's more movement here. It looks more melodic. It soars up, so it's a little bit more interesting, right? And then here in the violas, similar idea. Let's have a listen to that. Just hear the strings themselves. You hear the violas there, just rising. So, you know, just keep in mind that when you want the climax or when you want the energy of the piece to be a little higher, then it makes sense to have the strings move a little bit more and play more of a melodic role or a counter melodic role, right? So that means as long as the counter melodies mainly fit within the chord tones and you have the occasional passing tone or neighbor tone, the non-chord tones, to really bridge those together, you get a result that sounds cohesive and it feels like the string parts are independent, which is kind of what we want. That's what counterpoint is all about, is just making sure the lines that you've written out, they work together in a seamless way, but they still feel like independent melodic lines that are working well together. So that's kind of the main thing I was trying to focus on here. And then the dulcimer, hurdy-gurdy, and the bow harp are mainly playing more supportive roles. So if we just solo these up, you can see the dulcimer and the bow harp are doubled here. Hurdy-gurdy is playing the drone role. Basically the bass part, you know? There you hear the hurdy-gurdy at the top, playing the melodic role as well, in addition to the dulcimer bow harp. And that's about 3 minutes right there, you know? So that's the whole idea, you know? And I didn't want to make it overly complicated because again, we're not working with tons and tons of musicians here. It really is a string ensemble, and we have these sampled instruments, you know, the hurdy-gurdy, dulcimer bow harp, and I believe the percussion is also sampled in the final product. I'm not exactly sure, but just having live string players is always a treat. So you just want to make it as easy for them as possible and enjoyable for them as possible. And even if you're not working with live musicians, even if you're just doing your own mock-up, it makes a lot of sense to try to write parts that are interesting, melodic, and not just holding the same note throughout the entire piece, entire chord length, you know. Mix it up a little bit, but ultimately just go with your ear. Like listen to what sounds good and just go with that. And I think it just comes with experience as well. So, you know, personal taste aside, there are certain classical rules you can follow to result in nice, sonorous, rich string arrangements, and that's why I wanted to give you my string or Lush, you know, string writing guide to really go over those fundamental concepts that we really need to understand in order to write these string parts that really speak to the musicians, to yourself, to the listener, to the audience. Um, you know, arranging is an art in itself. So being able to control the notes that you're working with and the instruments that you have at your disposal, you know, making sure that those parts are all working together seamlessly is really important. So I just wanted to give you that guide. Totally free. Again, if you can click the first link in the box below, then you'll get access to it right away. And again, big thanks to Steven for having me on. It was a lot of fun. Every time working with him is a blast. So definitely check him out if you haven't already. And I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do respect your time. And I know that there are so many things you could be doing. So I appreciate that you take the time to check out one of these videos and hopefully you get something out of it. So in any case, I'll catch you in the next one. Take care and see you then. Bye-bye.